Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Circuit Stream workshop. Uh, Thank you, everyone, for joining us here on another exciting workshop here at Circuit Stream. This is going to be a very different workshop from a lot of the other ones that we're hosting here. But before I do continue on, I do want to do a quick AV audio visual check. Can you all let me know in the chat right there to the right of the screen? Can you all hear me and see me? Kyle and Brendan, great seeing you. Sergio, David, another David, Melly, Lee, Roderick, Jose, Vincente, Abder, everyone, awesome. Hey, it's great to see you all in attendance today for this workshop. As I mentioned, this one is going to be a little different from a lot of the other ones that we tend to host here. And I'll touch up on it a little bit. But with this, it's a pleasure to have you all join us for this workshop again. This is all recorded and will be sent out to you when the workshop is wrapped up by the end of day today. So if for those of you located abroad, let me know actually in the chat where you're currently located. I myself am in Canada, Calgary, Alberta. We have colleagues, Kyle and Brendan, located out of Ontario. I see Abder, Roderick from London, some from Antwerp, Alberta as well, Florida, Cologne, Paris, Spokane, Washington, Stockholm. So people from all over the world again. Now, for those of you, as I mentioned, who are located abroad, this is all recorded, so if you do have to go grab dinner, sleep, wake up if you're really on the other side of the world, no worries. You will get this recording to review at your own time. Now, as I mentioned, this workshop is going to be a very different and special workshop. It's going to be covering adding multiplayer functionality in Unity by creating a game of tag. Now, in advance, before we do continue on, this workshop is tailored for more advanced Unity users or for more advanced folks out there. So if you are a beginner or completely new to all this stuff, you're still more than welcome to stick around and observe, soak this all in, but don't feel discouraged because this is going to be tailored towards a more advanced audience. Now, with this, I'm going to continue on. I don't want to take too much of your time because we're really going to be putting in a lot of content within the next hour and a half, potentially up to 2 hours. So with this, what we're going to be covering today is multiplayer functionality in Unity, and we're going to be creating a game of tag. So I'm going to take less than 5 minutes to do an introduction here of myself and our guest instructor here at Circuit Stream. Then we're going to be taking up to an hour and a half covering the multiplayer functionality, a deep dive in creating this game of tag. It's literally going to be several hours of content squished into an hour and a half. So this is going to be a speed run, a literal speed run. So don't try and follow along. I would recommend sit back, soak this all in, ask questions if you have any questions, chat amongst yourselves in the chat tab there. Beside the chat, there is a questions tab, so feel free to pop in questions as you will. We have colleagues backstage, Kyle, Brendan, my colleague Jerry, and Dayon as well. So they will be there supporting any questions they can. Cash, as I mentioned, who will be joining us for the multiplayer functionality, will be going through this very quickly. So he's not going to have a lot of time to check out the chat or the questions, but we have a team backstage to help answer these for you all. And I do see a question here from John Martin. Yes, John, this is being recorded. So do sit back, soak this all in. And for all of you, you can really take the recording afterwards to try and recreate this yourself. All of the project files as well will be sent out to you all. So with that, after the hour and a half piece where we cover the multiplayer functionality, again, this is going to be very quick. We're going to condense a lot of content in this hour and a half. I'm going to rejoin, wrap it up for about 5 minutes. We're going to answer questions throughout this workshop and webinar, but I will see if we have enough time to do an in-depth Q&A at the very end of this workshop. I would hate for this to go longer than 2 hours. Want to respect all of your time. So if we don't answer questions at the very end, we're going to record this all down. You can join our Slack channel with those questions, and we'd be more than happy to shed light on those questions there. Again, this is all recorded. Project files and resources will be sent out to you. So sit back, soak this all in, chat amongst yourselves, ask questions, and we'll be sure to get those answered for you. So for those of you who are new to us here at Circuit Stream, my name is Stefan and I'm part of the education team here. I myself have over several years of experience in the tech industry, working with travel IT companies, learning management system providers, business integration and ERP platforms, and now in the beautiful world of virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality. Now, interesting icebreaker fact about myself, and I'm sure some of you have heard this many times before on previous workshops. I was a member of Water Polo Canada. I trained with the 2008 Beijing Olympic team. I was very young at that time, so I never had the chance to go to the Olympics. Great experience nonetheless. Now, today, it's an honor and a pleasure to have Cash Garman join us and lead the multiplayer portion of this workshop here. So Cash is an XR developer and instructor here at Circuit Stream. He himself has over 15 years of experience in the games industry. He was formerly an instructor at the University of Lincoln and University of Sussex. And an interesting icebreaker fact about Cash, he briefly held the world record for most consecutive days committing changes to GitHub by a human. So I think it was about 600 days of committing to GitHub that Cash was holding. There were robots ahead of him who had thousands of days of committing, but very cool fact by Cash, and I'm sure he'd love to talk to that a little bit more later on. But there's a few things that we do here at Circuit Stream, and it's really education and training that has been our bread and butter. We've been teaching people how to develop and create virtual reality and augmented reality experiences since 2015, and we've taught over 30,000 people how to develop, manage, and implement these VR and AR experiences at their workplaces or just create it from scratch themselves. And there's two main courses that we offer. One is beginner friendly, our XR development with Unity course, 10 weeks long, 4 hours per week for a total of 40 hours. And for those of you who are more so at that beginner level, April 27th is our next course. So if you're interested in checking it out, feel free to check out our website, or my colleague Dayan will toss in some links throughout this workshop. Now, for those of you who are advanced in Unity, this workshop is really tailored for you all, for those of you who are advanced. If you're looking to take it to the next level with your projects or to learn some more in-depth features, we have an XR project accelerator course for those who are considered advanced in XR and Unity. This is 8 weeks long, 5 hours per week for a total of 40 hours as well. And if you're interested in checking more about that, Dan will share some links, and it's visible on our website as well. Now, what differentiates us from a lot of the other people out there? It's the one-on-one support and mentorship that comes with both of those courses, where we sit down privately with you all to work on your project, support you with the development process, and offer you the best insights and steps to really further accelerate what you're working on. Now that you've learned a little bit about us, what are you going to learn today? Well, today we'll be covering multiplayer feature theory and basics. We'll also be covering what is Photon 2 networking engine. Then we'll be going into how to enable and use the Photon 2 in your Unity apps, as well as how to build a simple game of tag in about an hour to an hour and a half with this multiplayer functionality. Now, we'll also be writing C# scripts and game logic for networking in Unity. And again, this is going to be for more advanced people here on the workshop. If you're a beginner, feel free to stick around, soak this all in. But for all of you here, this is more advanced. We will do a speed run here, going through the content very, very quickly. So I wouldn't recommend following along. You will get the recording to review and work with on your own time. But sit back, soak it in, talk with amongst each others in the chat, ask questions in the questions tab, and we'll get some conversation stirring there. But today is an introduction to multiplayer functionality in Unity, and we'll be creating the game of tag here. So I'm going to take this time to invite Cash onto the stage here. It's a pleasure and an honor to have Cash join us on one of these workshops finally. It's his first time hosting a workshop here on Livestorm. So great to have you with us, Cash. Thank you very much. Again, this is going to last about an hour and a half. It's going to be a speed run. Soak this all in. ask questions and we'll try and get them all answered for you. This will be recorded as well, so you'll have the recording to work with and follow along, slow it down later on. But Cash, great seeing you. Thank you again for joining us. You're all in great hands. And with that, feel free to take it away, Cash. Thank you again.
Thanks, Steph. Appreciate it. Okay, yeah, this is going to be pretty quick, so buckle in. I'll be explaining as I code as best I can. Just to prove this is completely from scratch, can you guys see my screen okay there? Hey, Lee.
I can see it, man. I can see your screen, yeah.
This is completely from scratch. Right, let's open up Unity. We're going to be using the latest version of Unity for this, so I'm on 2020.3, making a brand new project. 2020.3, 3D project, and it'll be called Game of Tag. I'm going to be using some third-party assets for this. The obvious one is Pun, which is Photon for Unity. I'll be using Pun 2, which is free. It doesn't really have any limitations other than you can have 20 people online at once while you're developing, so it's perfect for developers. The other assets I'll be using is a third-party controller, which will come with the model and all the controls. And I'll be using a simple tutorial level just to save me some time. Everything else is it's all me. So it will be fast. I'm also not using Visual Studio as my IDE because I operate faster in one called Rider, but the code itself is the same. Okay, so I'm setting myself up here. First step here is I want to bring in my packages I downloaded earlier, the ones I just mentioned. So in my assets, first I want to grab that third-party controller. There it is, third-party controller. It has fly mode too. It's pretty exciting. So that one, don't worry about this warning. It's saying it's going to overwrite some settings in my project. Not a problem because it's a brand new project. Second, I'm going to import is that tutorial level once this is finished. And it's under speed tutor, I think. That's the guy. So I'll pull that in quick. Give me my level. And finally, Pun. Pun 2. Free version. Let's bring it in. So this is immediately going to ask me once it's finished importing for my app ID. So at this point, I've already registered to the Photon website. So I'm going to go straight to my dashboard. And this is where you'll create new apps. So I'm going to be creating a new app for my app. I'm going to make sure this is set to Photon. Pun is the Photon type. I'm going to call it Game of Tag. I'm not going to bother with the description. And I will create that. Now that will immediately give me an app ID, as you can see here. So I'm going to copy that and get it ready. If I jump back to Unity, Unity should be, did I not hit import? I didn't hit the import button. Smart. Hopefully this is fast. Once it's finished importing, it'll immediately prompt me for the app ID. Yeah, I'm sorry about my resolution. If it's a bit too small for people, I can't actually change this, but I will scale up the font size in Rider so that's more clear. So once this is imported, the first scene I'll be making is a menu scene. So a very simple menu scene. It's where people can actually connect to the game and choose their name as well. And we're good. So here's my prompt screen there, asking me for my app ID, which I got on the clipboard. So I'm going to set up my project. That's good to go. First things first, collapse some of this down, keep it a bit tidy here. I'm going to try to keep things tidy. Make a new scene. This is going to be my menu scene. I'm going to remove the sample scene. I don't care about that. And open up my menu scene. Okay, it's a nice standard scene here. I'm going to grab my main camera. I'm going to be just using a blank solid color in the background. I'm going to choose my favorite color, that. And I'm going to start creating a UI. I'm going to do this in scene view just so I can edit it more easily. So first thing I'm going to do is start with well, it's first going to prompt me to import the TextMesh Pro Essentials. I'm using TextMesh Pro, as most of you are probably familiar with, to create my text. So I have my text in the middle of the screen here. I'm going to call this my logo. Yes, we have time for a logo. This is going to be pretty painful to watch if you're a graphic designer because it's going to be pretty ugly how fast I do this. And I'm going to call this Game of Tag. It is a bold for now. I'm being told it's a notification bell I can turn off. That's off now. Sorry for the notification sounds there. Thanks, Steph. Okay, so we're going to need a place for the player to input their name. So I'm going to use an input field here. Zoom in a bit. I'm going to just eyeball this like before. Before I go any further, though, I'm going to make sure in my game view I'm not using free aspect. I want to make sure this works more or less on 1080p. So I'm going to use 1080p as my resolution and scale things up accordingly. So I'll just scale that up. And we'll come back to the font sizes in a moment. Let's just get this stuff lined up. So that's going to be my input for text. I'm going to have, so I'll call that name input. I'm going to have a button so I can start playing the game. So we'll have a button, text mesh pro. I'll make it the same size as my input field, roughly. Nothing has to be perfect here. And then finally, I'm going to add an extra little bit of text at the bottom here, just called status text, just so I can see if there's any kind of error messages or anything going on, I'll be able to see them. So I'm going to make that just tucked beneath here, just so I can see if I've successfully connected. Right, now let's sort these font sizes out because they're a little bit bitty. So I'm going to select all my things with font, and I'm going to just ramp that size up. Let's give our button a name, call it play. And let's have a look at that. Oh, it's not pretty. We'll just up the size a bit of this. Whoop. We get a bit wider. And that'll have to do. Just give this status. Sorry, wrong one. This will be status text. Okay, that's pretty much it for now. Now we're going to need a main controller for this. This is going to be a controller. The script will be managing the connection using Photon. So Photon is incredibly easy to use, easy to get started with. And so all of the starting up, connecting to the master server, creating a room, which is basically your game level, connecting to it and launching the game room itself is all done within this connection script. So I'm going to make myself a scripts folder so that's nice and tidy. I'm going to create my connection script. I don't spell anything too wrong. And I'll pop that in here, and I'm going to reset the position because I like it when things are at 0. Now, our first code. This is our Rider taking a moment to open up, and there it is. Rider does take a moment to initialize. So we're using Photon or Pun. So if I want to have access to its callbacks, it's a very callback-based library. I don't want to be inheriting from monobehavior. I'm actually going to be inheriting from monobehavior Pun callback. That'll give me access to all of its callbacks. So at the start, what I want to do here, first I guess I want to clear out that, clear the status text. We don't need that. I'm going to make a method for that so I can be using this elsewhere. Clear status, so I'll set status to empty. I'll make that method. And that method will take a message. And I'll have my status text, which I'll be connected to in a second. I'll set that text to message. So this will be a TMP Pro, TMP text method. You can see I'm moving pretty quickly here, but the code itself is still the same. Okay, so that'll give me a little message. I'm just going to move that down there. Out of the way. I don't need update for now. And finally, I want to connect to the Photon master server. Now, everything I use with Photon uses the Photon network namespace. And this is pretty straightforward. I want to be able to connect using settings. Now, what does it mean by using settings? Well, if I go back to Unity and I quickly search in my project assets for settings, I should find, if I make this a list, scriptable objects, server settings, server settings, server settings. No, it's not here. So let me just do this manually here. Real-time Unity resources. Here. This is the scriptable object that you'll be using for all your server settings. If you find this, you can set things up. I'm not going to have to change anything here, but you'll see I have my app ID here. If I wanted to change my region for testing, then I could do that here. So this is something where you'd be specifically setting up your server stuff. We're not going to worry about that, but this is the settings it's talking about when I say connect with settings. Cool. So now we start looking at these callbacks. So I want to know when that's succeeded. So on connected to master server, that's our first one. Now, I don't actually have to call the base on any of these. If I look at the base, they're all empty. So if you see me delete these bases, because we don't need them. First of all, I want to set our status to connected to master. We are now actually ready to test. I'll confirm that works. So if I run this guy, I done my classic maneuver of not wiring up any of my my variables there. That's my trademark maneuver, as any of my students will tell you. And there we go, connected to master. So that worked. Just took a second. Okay, so one thing I want to do here as well as this connecting, I want to set all my inputs to be disabled. Set inputs enabled, or I'll set inputs, yeah, enabled is fine. And I'll set them all to false. So I just want to disable those so people don't start typing things when they shouldn't. So that'll be enabled. And this will be where I actually create all my stuff. So my input, sorry, my name input doesn't exist yet. I'll set it's interactable false, sorry, to enabled. I'll do the same thing with the play button. You'll notice neither of these exist yet, but that's what IDEs are for. That will be a TMP input field. This will be a button. And I'll import UI for that. So let me wire those up quickly. Okay, so we have a play button. Let's connect that up. I'll actually call it play button. That makes a huge difference. Wire up the play button, wire up my input, and that should be us good to go. And so now those are disabled. Now when I'm successfully connected to the master, that's when I want to re-enable those. So they're disabled when they're not being used. Cool. Now, what if something goes wrong? I should just definitely keep an eye on the on disconnected message. And it'll give a cause. Again, I don't need the base, so I'm going to do a set status. We shouldn't see this in this example, but it's good to have error checking. So I'm going to use an interpolation string here to set disconnected. And I'll give it that cause that's passed in. Probably won't see that, but there we go. So now, if I do successfully connect to the master, what's next? So, actually, sorry, we've already done that bit here. Now I'm interested in the button, right? At this point, we've enabled our button again. Now let's do our play button. So we'll have a public void on click, and what's being clicked? Play button. So this is what we'll wire up to our button in the scene. So first of all, I want to check, make sure the player has entered a name. So I'll quickly check that if the string is null, which is the name input text. If that's the case, then I want to let them know they need to enter a name. Please enter a name, and I'll bail out of here. We don't want to continue. Finally, we know we have a name. We need to set the player's name, actually called nickname, as far as Photon is concerned. So we're using Photon network again and set the nickname. This is a static thing. If you set, as long as we set this before we join a game, then it'll have the correct nickname. So we have a name input and text. So now whatever text we did, now let's just, while I'm here, to be a little bit cheeky, because I'm going to be rerunning this a lot, I'm actually going to store my name for the next run, so I don't have to keep typing it in. I'm going to use player prefs for that. If you're familiar with this, this is pretty straightforward. Basically, it's just going to save it, so next time I'll have the same name. So I'll set the string called player name. I'll set that to, again, the name inputs text. So next time I come along, which will be up here, my start method, I'll restore the player name. And that'll just set the name inputs. Name input, oh, typing great today. Name input text will equal player prefs dot get string, and that's that player name key I used earlier. And that should be most I need here for now. But now what I want to do is, once this is all done, I actually want to attempt to join a random room. So it's going to, the clients, if they run this, they'll try to connect to a random game that's already running. If that fails, we'll know we're the first person there, and we'll be able to create the room. So let's see how this looks. We'll use Photon Network again, and we'll say join random room. Just notice these are pretty straightforward to run, and they're all based on callbacks. What happens if that fails? Well, first of all, yeah, let's look at the failure first. So on join random failed. So at this point, we know that there is no random. There's no room. There isn't any games. This is where my grammar perfectionism will kill me. There aren't any games running, so we need to start one. But we know there's nothing currently running, so we're the first people here. So we do again Photon network dot create room. And this one does take a few things. It needs a name for the room. Since we're all going to be using the same room when we play, it's going to be just called game of tag. Could be anything you want. And we are going to pass some options in here. So I'm going to use an object initializer just to set the max players to the maximum that the free version will allow in 20. And finally, this does take a types lobby. Actually, that can be null, so I'll leave that as null. I guess only if you're implementing a lobby screen with chat and so on. So we'll just leave that as is. Now, if that succeeds, we'll get a on joined room, which means you successfully joined the room. Perfect. Success. Now, if we are the host of this room, and there's an easy way to find that out, we can ask Photon Network if we're the master client. That's basically asking us, are we the host? Now, if we're the host, we're going to be wanting to load the game scene. So if you're familiar with scene manager, load level and stuff like that, we won't be using that. We'll be using something very similar that Photon provides. There's a lot of Unity methods that are replaced by Photon methods because they have to handle all the network backend at the same time. So what I need to do here is a Photon network dot load level, and it operates just the same as Unity does. It just takes a name. So I'm going to have a scene I haven't made yet called game. That's pretty much it. Now, one thing I need to change here is, I could show you it failing, but due to time, I'm not going to. We want to set it up so when the host changes the scene, then any connected clients will automatically join that scene. It's called auto syncing the level. So I'm going to do that right at the start here before I'll just call it configuring or config Photon. There's only really this one setting. So I'm going to go Photon network dot auto. Yeah, we go automatically sync scene. So this is pretty much the only thing we need to change in the configuration. This will just force the players who join to automatically join the host in the scene that they launched. Right. So this script should be mostly good to test, but we kind of want to have a scene to move to. Let's add that scene. I'm actually going to copy this scene from that free scene that I got in the asset. So I'm going to check out their scenes. I'm going to find our test scene. I'm going to duplicate it and drag it over to my scenes and call it game. Now, before I can load scenes, a lot of you know this, before you can load a scene in code, you need to make sure that your scenes in your build setting include all the scenes that you're going to be loading. So I definitely going to need my menu scene, and I'm going to need my game scene. Cool. So now let's see that load. If I don't enter a name, I should get warned to enter a name. Oh, yep, I forgot to wire up my button. Always forgetting to wire things up. So I forgot to wire up my button, so we'll tell the button to talk to the connection controller and run on click play. Do that again. Please enter a name. I didn't enter a name. I'm going to go with Bob. And there we go. That created, it first failed to find a random room, and when it failed, it created a room. And when that was successfully joined the room, it then proceeded to load the level. And that's just what happened there. And it only did that because I was the host. The Photon Network master client was true. That's great. Now let's actually build this thing out so we can test if it works with 2 people. Before I do that, I'm going to change a couple player settings because I'm going to be building this a lot. I do want to squeeze both these things onto one screen. So I'm just going to change the size of this a bit. I'm going to go with a windowed client, 1080. Let's go with something even small. Let's go like 800 by 800. And I'm going to turn off the splash screen because this takes too long. Okay, that'll do. And now I'm going to build and run, and I'll create a new folder called build, and that's where my build's going to live. So select that folder, build will kick off, and run. So from here on in, my editor is going to be called Bob, and my client that I'm building is going to be called Steve, just so we can distinguish the two. Allow access to the firewall. We see that I should have gone with 1080p. I mean 1920, but this will do for now. So this will be Steve. He clicks play. He's actually joined now and is in the same. Oh, sorry, he's not. He's host because I clicked play on him first. So now Bob here is going to be the client. So let's see if Bob automatically joins that scene. Success. So they're actually both now in the same scene, but they're not seeing anything, obviously. So that's our step 1, our menu. We shouldn't have to revisit that anymore. One thing I do quickly want to add is load up that game, and I want to be able to hit escape to come back to the main menu. because I want to demonstrate how leaving rooms work. So In our game view here, our game scene, sorry, we're going to have a script called game controller. Well, actually, we'll call it game manager. Whatever. The name is not super important. And again, we'll need a script for that. So we'll make a new script called game manager. Anybody can tell me why when you call a script game manager, it turns into a little cog instead of a script icon? Let me know. It's always done that, and I've never been sure why. Okay, now we have our game script. Let's see what this is up to. It's going to do a lot of stuff, but for now, let's just have it. For now, we'll just have it so it. Do I want to put this here? No, I'm going to hold off on that exit thing. I'm going to add that a little bit later. But one thing I do need to know is you'll notice when the scene loaded, there was no players. So what needs to happen, you need to consider, this is something you need to consider when you're dealing with networking, is anybody who loads this scene will have their scene populated by all these objects I created, including the game manager script. So every single client is going to have a game manager script at their end, and every single one of those game manager scripts will run locally on each client's machine, the start method. So in this start method, each client can be responsible for instantiating their own player, the character that they're going to be controlling. Now, they're not going to use the traditional instantiate that Unity provides. Instead, we're going to make sure that we're also using Pun callbacks here instead of the regular mono behavior. And we're going to use the Photon network.instantiate, because again, it has to propagate this over the network, so we can't use just the Unity version. Now, there's an interesting quirk with Photon in that you don't reference prefabs directly like you might in Unity. Every prefab that is involved in the network at any level, so if something's going to be instantiated over the network, for instance, our player, it has to be in a folder called resources, which I'll show you in a second. Actually, I should show you that now. I might as well. So we need a new folder called resources. You can live anywhere in your project. Usually put it at the top. And all of your prefabs need to be listed here. Listed in here. So let's get our prefab for our character. That means finding our character. So here's our asset for our third-person controller. Let's dig out that guy's prefab. It's called Shadow. It's a pretty cool little prefab. He's off the side of the screen right now, so let me bring him over. You noticed he came with a camera. That's going to come up in a minute. Keep that in mind. Now, I'm not going to mess around with his prefab. I'm actually going to unpack that prefab completely so it's my own, and I'm going to call it player. So it's kind of starting from scratch. Now we can do away with this. And like I said, any of our own prefabs have to live within the resources folder. So I'm going to create a resource prefab and put it there in resources. So now we have our basic player. And it's many changes are going to have to come to this, but we'll come to those as they become problems. So let's jump back to here. And now we're going to want our player prefab. Like I said, it has to refer to the name of the prefab. So we can still reference this. We can still make that a serializable game object. But we have to access it by name. What else does it need? It needs a position and rotation. Okay, so let's make a spawn point, shall we? Spawn point, just like a transform in the world, so we can control where people appear. So we'll make a spawn point. It'll be a transform, so we can just use its position. And that should be everything. Oh no, we need quaternion. I'm going to use no rotation on this, or quaternion identity. Let's quickly create our spawn point. That will be a transform. And let's go to Unity. Add it somewhere in the world. I'm going to make it, we'll call this a spawn point. And I'm going to place it on that little cube in the middle. Once Unity lets me. There we go. So let me reset its position, zoom in on it. Got a 2D view here, and I'm just going to position it somewhat in the middle on this platform. I'll have it a little bit above the platform so they kind of drop down onto it, so like they're spawning from the air. Perfect. And we'll set that up with our game manager. So we have our prefab now. So again, that's in resources. It just needs it for the name. Photon's going to be looking in its resource folder and finding it based on that. So, and we'll just connect our spawn point too. That should get us started enough to run our game and hopefully have our player spawned. Now we're going to run into problems right away. I know these problems are coming, but I want to show you the problems before we solve them. Otherwise, it's not as entertaining or educational. Okay, so we're going to start back here. We'll start with just Bob. I'm not going to fire up Steve for now. Okay, so Bob joins. Okay, immediately we have a problem here. People might recognize this problem. There are two audio listeners in the scene. This usually means you have two cameras in the scene, and that's true. We have a camera that came with the scene. This kind of profile camera to show off the scene. We don't need that anymore. If I delete that camera, we see we're left with a camera, which is already placed behind our character here, and you can see our character does some pretty cool stuff. He can jump, he can run. He's great. He also has his own camera, which will be another problem in a minute. So let's make sure we make that change permanent. So we're not here, sorry. In the game scene, we want to get rid of that camera now. Our own guy has his own camera. We also probably, we should get rid of this player who's just sitting in the scene doing nothing. Let's get rid of him too. So we expect this. We expect no cameras yet, because until we instantiate the first player with their own camera, then we won't see anything. So let's try that again. This time, I will fire up Bob. Sorry, Steve. Bye, Steve. Okay, here's Steve. So about the UI there again. So I'm going to fire up Bob as our server. And let's see what problems we've got so far. No cameras rendering. Okay, I expected this. If we look at our error here, it says Photon network instantiate can only instantiate objects with a Photon view component. Okay, a Photon view is the first and probably the most used part of what makes networking work in Photon. So what we need to do is take our player prefab here, and we need to add a Photon view. I already have Photon selected here. You can see there's a whole bunch of stuff here, but the Photon view is what we're interested in. Now, Photon view, its job is to basically coordinate with any other components on this object, which are observable objects. Sorry, observable components. Right now, there aren't any, so this won't do anything except for give that that networked object. Anything with a Photon view on it, you can consider to be a networked object. It will be synchronized across the network. It'll give it an ID, but beyond that, it doesn't do anything. So, but it'll allow us to instantiate it. So let's start with that. So we'll build up Steve again. I have to kill him. There we go. He is building. And now we'll run. So Bob's going to be our host, and that's fine. Bob's looking great, right? No problems with Bob. His camera's following him properly. Everything's great. But what happens when we bring Steve in? Right, we got a problem here. Well, first of all, we're seeing two problems here. We have two cameras in the scene again. So I'm actually not. First of all, okay, there's three major problems. One at a time. One is that I'm controlling both players. That's not what we want, obviously. And the reason for that is the scripts that run this third-party controller, they're not built with networking in mind. So when I press the W, A, S, and D keys, or move my mouse, they have update functions running that just go ahead and look at those for me. They don't care if I'm on the network or not. They're just to say, oh, it's a player controller. There's only going to be one of these here, surely. So I'm just going to listen to that. But obviously, we have two in the scene now. That's not going to work. So we want to be able to disable any inputs for other characters in the screen, other little running guys in the screen that aren't ours. They don't belong to us. We should only be controlling the one that is local to this machine. Every other one, we're going to just leave alone. We don't touch it. We just listen and let the network tell us where that is. So that's going to be one of our first steps. Another step we have here is we actually have that two camera problem again. And this is occurring. This is a small fix, so we'll do this quickly. That's because this prefab, if we look at it, right down the bottom here, has got a camera. We need that camera, but we only need that camera if we've spawned our player. We don't need that camera for other players who spawn in the scene. Otherwise, we'll have multiple cameras in the scene again, and we'll run into the same problems we had before. So let's add to our, we'll add a new script. This is going to be called Playercontrol. This is where most of our gameplay stuff is going to live, and that's going to live on our prefab, our player prefab. So let's add that player control there. Boop, there it is. And the first order of business for this guy, I'm going to do this in a wake, actually. I want this to happen really early on, is I want to remove, if this is not the local player, now this also has to come from Pun, Callbacks. And when I inherit from Pun, we get a very, very useful variable called Photon view. This Photon view is that component I added to the prefab. And this Photon view gives us tons of useful information, including one of the most useful ones, this one here. there's plenty of documentation here, but I'll just skim over it. Does this thing belong to me? Did I make it? Is it mine? If it is, this code will run. If it is not, so I put my not there. So now I know it's a remote player. It's another person that I'm not controlling. I want to get rid of that camera. So I'm going to destroy whatever camera this is wired up to. Actually, it's going to be, yeah, let's make that first. We'll make a camera, and we'll make it a camera. And you know, when you're destroying things, you need to destroy the game object itself, where the whole object goes. And that should do it. Should be enough to solve that problem. So we can give that a quick test. We should not see this error anymore. We should see a whole pile of other errors instead. Because that camera was being used throughout the input code that this third-person controller. Oops, I ran it when Steve was well running. Sorry, Steve. So all the input scripts that are running on that third-party controller, that third-person character we're running around with, a lot of them refer to the camera. Now I've gone ahead and deleted the camera. We're going to have problems. But luckily, we need to get rid of that code anyway for those remote players, because we don't want to be controlling everybody in the scene at once. Okay, that didn't quite work out. Let me check my code quickly. If Photon view, not mine, wait, camera. I didn't read my error message right at the top because I forgot to wire up my camera, as I love doing. Let me quickly do that. Player, main camera, camera. There we go. So now the camera is connected. So let's do that one more time. All those little things that chew up my time here. Hopefully someone's following along. Oh, I did it again. Let's close Steve there. Fire him up again. And then we'll fire up Bob as well. So we should see a replacement of not having, instead of seeing all those 2 cameras in the scene errors, we'll see a whole bunch of other errors. But these are expected. And we also notice we're not moving around yet. So the networking isn't actually sending the position of our players yet. So let's close Steve off and let's add those things at once. So this is a bit of if you're porting your own code to be multiplayer, you'll have to go through a similar process as I'm about to go through. If you're porting somebody else's code or your own, if you're doing it from scratch, you'll be able to do these checks as you code it for the first time. But what I basically need to do is go through all of these components here, my basic behavior, move behavior, aim behavior, and fly behavior, and I just need to make sure anything to do with input is bypassed. We can just bail on those things, and you'll see what I mean as I start to do it. So I'm going to start with the beginning with basic behavior. Okay, what have we got? We can see straight away we've got an update that's immediately starting to do some input stuff. We want to be able to bail out right here. Now, to do that, I still need to know about my Photon view. Now, I'm not inheriting from callbacks here, because I don't actually need the callbacks. I just need the Photon view. So I'm changing the inherited from mono behavior to mono behavior pun, and that would give me what I need, which is don't run this if it's a remote player. It's a pretty simple check. I do my Photon view is mine, and I make sure I negate that, and if it isn't mine, I just return. Now we're going to be needing this a lot, so I'm going to grab this, and we'll keep looking for anything else I might. Okay, we got a fixed update here too. Don't want that. Bail on it. What else we got? Late update. Don't want that. Bail on it. So if you're porting code, you'll be going through a similar process as I am right now, and I believe that is everything in this script. It's not hard work. It's just long work. So next one, move behavior. Let's see what we got here. Well, the first thing is this inherits some generic behavior, not mono behavior. So if I want to make this inherit from mono behavior pun, I need to do that at a lower level. So I'm going to change this generic behavior to inherit from pun. And now we carry on. Start, that's fine. Update, it's talking about jumping. We don't want jumping. It's none of our business unless it's our character. So we get rid of that. Now these local fixed updates and other things like that, these are overridden and we'll be skipping those elsewhere. So don't worry about those. Nothing else in here. Cool. Next one. Aim behavior. We got an update in here. Let's bail on that. This one actually also inherits some generic behavior, so it's already inheriting from that mono behavior pun. I think everything else here is fine. Yep. Again, these are being skipped elsewhere, so we don't need to worry about those. That's that one. Now this leaves us with the fly behavior. And yep, it's got an update with some input stuff, so we make sure you port there. And I think that is everything. So that was a bit of a slog going through a bunch of other people's code and making sure we just bailed. If it's not ours, we're not interested. So let's try that again. So we'll build up Steve. We're at the halfway mark. Well, Steve can be the host for now. Let's get Steve over here. Now, what we're expecting to see here is not any kind of networking. We're adding that next. We expect to see I'm not controlling the other player, which is exactly what's happening. And there's no errors. So that abort code I added to all of their input scripts is doing the trick. So now I'm only in control myself. When I press these keys, the scripts running on that other guy are just ignoring them. Perfect. So let's get rid of Steve here. Now we need to start getting this networking in, shall we? Like, if we can't see these guys moving. This bit's remarkably easy. This is what makes Photon so popular. If I go back to my player here, you'll notice that Photon view has this list of observed components, which is empty right now. We can add our own observed components, and we will be later. But Photon comes with a whole pile of its own, really, really useful to set up, easy to set up. So if I have a look in the same list, so I'm looking for Photon, one of the useful ones in here is transform view. This will handle all of the networking for the transform component, which you can imagine is pretty useful. And all you have to do in this is check which boxes you want to synchronize. I want position or rotation. I'm not going to be messing with scale in this game, so that's fine. And you'll notice on my Photon view here, it automatically detected that I added an observable view, and it kept track of that in this thing for me. So I don't have to do anything but add that. I don't even have to change any settings. Let's see how that works out. Build up Steve. We'll let Steve be host. So there's Steve. Now let's see if we can get some motion going. Oops, I didn't run that. Incoming Bob. All right, first thing we see is Steve's moved. That's a good sign. So let's move Steve around. Look at that. We have networked motion. But it's only synchronizing the transform. We're not playing any animations. So we're getting our movement, but no animations. Luckily, that's just as easy, adding transform. So let's go ahead and do that too. Back in our prefab. Alongside our transform view, what else do we have? We have an animator view. This one's great. It automatically detects everything to do with your animation controller. It detects any parameters you might have in there. So there's quite a few in this. It detects any layers. And you can specifically choose which ones you want to send over the network. And you can choose whether you send them discretely, which is every so often, or continuously, which is, I believe, more frequently. I didn't make this animation controller, so I couldn't really make an educated guess here which ones I should send. So I'm going to send all of them, and I'm going to send them all discretely. There are probably some that you don't necessarily need to send, but it's not really going to do us any harm here. So I'm just going to send all of the animation info. And again, test it. And it really is this simple when it comes to this basic synchronization of things like animations and movement. It really is simple. You can have any amount of objects in the scene, as long as they have that Photon view on them and they have the synchronizing their transform or anything else. We should see now animation, just like that. You got a jump, we have everything. You notice it's stuttering a little bit here? I've only found that stuttering to show up if in the person who's using the editor. If this is using two built clients, that stuttering seems to vanish. So I'm not sure if there's some optimizations that I need to do there, but that's not an issue in a built copy. Okay. Right, so what have we got next here on my list? So we have basically, it'd be nice to see what our players' names are, right? Though right now we don't have a way of seeing who's who. So let's add a bit more to our prefab here. So our player prefab. Let's give them a little canvas, a little world space canvas. So there's always, as people who've worked with world space canvases know, there's always a little bit of a headache when setting them up, and that they start out as screen space, which you then change the world space, and then there are these massive, great big things. So I'm going to just go through the way I normally do this. I center it, I give it a reasonable size, and then I use my magic number of scaling, which is 0.02. Feel free to use it. It basically allows you to use reasonable font sizes. Let me move my canvas up here. Not going to dwell too much on this. I'm going to give it to Text Mesh Pro. Because I'm building inside here, you see it didn't automatically put as a child, so I need to child that manually. And by doing that, I've created a ridiculous scale. So a lot of this is, if I edited this in a scene, this wouldn't be a problem, but I'm doing it in the isolated mode. And we'll call this the name text. And we'll just call it name text here too. I'll see it's backwards, so we probably want to do some spinning around of stuff. Let's just spin our canvas 180. We may not need this, but we'll do it anyway. So I'm going to blow this up to fill up the entire canvas, and I'm going to center it. Cool. That'll do for now. Now let's have a look at that. First of all, let's wire it up so it actually adds a name. So in our player controller, when this starts, again in awake, we'll say, all right, I'll set the players. Actually, we'll put this in a method. Update the players name display, because we're going to come back to this and do something extra with it later. So update name display. Make that a method. What's it going to do? It's going to initially just take the name text, which I haven't made yet, set it to, now this is where we can use our Photon view again. It's like we had that nickname that we set way, way back at the beginning. Where we can look at our Photon view, and remember this was created back in our game manager. This was created using Photon Network Instantiate. So whoever ran this code, remember every single client runs it themselves, whoever ran this code became the owner of that object. So if I go to the Photon view of the player controller, which is running on that instantiated object, I can check for the owner. That'll belong to whatever player created it. And that owner has a bunch of stuff, including nickname. So we can use that to show the nickname. So I just need to create this as a TMP text and try not to forget to wire it out this time. So there it is. So I'll slap the name text in there, and let's give it a quick trial run. I'm just going to try it with Bob. Don't need to just want to see if it looks good. Okay, it's backwards, fine, but also it's not facing the camera. So let's throw a real quick billboard on that so it always faces the camera. You've probably seen a million versions of this code, so I'm not going to dwell. I'm just going to call it. I'm not going to dwell on it too much. Call it face camera. I'm going to put that on the name text itself. I'm going to use my way of doing facing camera. It's not the most robust. It's not the best, but it works. So in here, in update, I'm not even going to comment it. It's going to take the transform of this object. I'm going to change its forward vector to be the camera main. Remember, there's only one camera in the scene, so we can do camera main, transform forward. So I'm matching their forward directions. There we go. So we have a nice, simple facing camera view. So let's bring Steve in and see if that works for him too. Steve's the host this time. He's got his name over his head. And we'll bring in Bob. There he is, looking good. We got the kind of basics of a running around and doing nothing game, but this is a game of tag. So let's make it a game of tag. This is where the player control is going to come in. This is where all the gameplay logic starts to come in. And so far, we've only really used one of the three channels of communication that Photon adds. We've used the Photon view and its observables, which are very powerful and excellent for things like transforms, animations, things like that. But there are two other ways of doing communicating over Photon, and we'll be using both of them. So the first thing I want to do is I want to have someone be able to be tagged and untagged. Let's start from where I want this to happen, where I want the first to call this. This is what I like to call my top-down programming. When a game starts, where we are, game manager. When a game starts, I kind of want somebody has to be tagged first, otherwise it's not a game of tag. So what we'll do here, once we've instantiated this new this new, we'll store this thing as the new player. This is the new player we've created. Now, what we'll do is if we are the host, so we're the first one into the game, we're the host. Again, using Photon network dot is master client. We'll have it, because we're the first one in, the host should probably start as tagged. So this is where we're going to use something called an RPC. What I want to do is have a method on the player controller called onTagged. It's kind of like an event. And I want to be able to call that method from anywhere, from any other client. So it's called a remote RPC because that stands for remote procedure call. So I'm remotely running a method on another client, and all clients in this case. So to do that, I need to get a hold, first of all, of our Photon view. So I have this, what's this instantiated? Game object. Okay, cool. So we have a game object, and we know that game object has a player controller on it. It's on the prefab. So the first thing we can do, well, first of all, let's say if you're the host, start as tagged. All right, so we've got this game object. We want to grab our player controller, and we've got that. We have access to our Photon view. Now, once we've got our Photon view, we can call this method called RPC. And this is basically it's as simple as this. Whatever I'm calling a method by name using this on this script. That script on this object. So I'm calling a method on here on that object. So I have to use a name for it. So I'll call it onTagged. And it does need to take something else. And this is how are we going to call this thing? And these are the different ways you can call it. So I can say, okay, when I call this method, I want to broadcast that fact that I called the method to everybody in the room. That's great. I could also send it to everybody but myself. Also cool. And then we have this one here. I'm sending this to everybody, but I want it to be buffered. What does buffered mean? So buffered means not only will it be sent to everybody in the room that's currently in the room, but it's also going to take that RPC and put it on a list, like a buffer. And if someone new joins the game, then the first thing they'll do is go through that buffer and call them all of the methods on that buffer. That way you can kind of bring them up to speed to where the game's at. If I didn't use this, if I just used all, and then I tagged a player, and then another player joined, they never would have received this RPC. So they would not have had a chance to run any of the logic on this particular player of them being tagged. So in this case, I definitely want to have all buffered. There are other ones there which you can look into yourself, but this is the one we're definitely going to be using here. So now we have to create this method called onTagged, and that's going to be on our player controller. So let's jump over there. Okay, we'll just pop it in here. Make a public void onTagged. Doesn't take any parameters, but we do have to put an attribute on this. That's to have a pun, an RPC. That's all you need to do. Just attribute any method that you're going to be calling remotely using an RPC. Just put a pun RPC attribute on top, and you're fine. So at this point, we can say, okay, what happens when we're tagged? I guess we should probably flag the player as tagged. That's a good start. Then we can probably I'm going to use colors, the color of the player, to distinguish who's been tagged or not. So I'm going to change the color of, yes, I'm British / Canadian, so you have to deal with my spelling, of the player to be the tagged color. So first of all, this is easy. We'll just have an is tagged Boolean, which sets it true. So we'll just create that quickly. It lives up there, no problem. Finally, all right, how are we going to change this? All right, let's do a little bit of digging on our prefab and see what we're dealing with here. Just want to change its color. That's all I want to do. All right, so I'm on the player here. Nothing useful here. This is just scripts and our Photon stuff and some rigid body. Let's look down. So we got a mesh here. Aha, here we go. The skinned mesh renderer. So this is the guy we want to find because this will allow us access to the material and therefore the color. So this skinned mesh renderer. So the fastest way I can think of grabbing that is using a get component in children. So I'm going to do a get component in children. There we go. And I'm going to be looking for that skinned mesh renderer. So it'll look through all the children and it'll find that skinned mesh renderer. Now I'll have access to its material and therefore access to its color. And I'll simply set that to the tagged color, whatever I happen to set that up as. I'll make that something I can configure in my prefab. So I'll create that as a serializable field with tagged color. Now, while I'm here, I might as well make the untagged because we know we're going to need it, right? So I'm going to just go ahead and copy in this and have it untagged. And this will flag the player as untagged, so not much going on here. And then we want to restore the color of the player to be the initial color. So we're going to have to keep track of whatever the color was at the start, right? So we'll make a new variable for that. And we can just do that in awake. We can just say, store the initial color. This allows us to swap back and forth. So we'll copy all this because I can't be bothered typing again. And we'll set our initial color to be equal to that. So now we have something we can jump back to. And we've pretty much done the tagging and untagging RPCs. So the last thing we did that led us here is we wanted to start the host as tagged. So we need to check now if this runs. We should see if we fire up one of them. We don't need both clients. Let's fire up Bob. We should see Bob turn. Oops. I almost forgot to wire something up as usual. I need to actually choose a color for a tagged player. I'm going to choose my kind of favorite color again. Make sure I give it some alpha. You can have this whatever you want. Now we should see Bob should immediately turn this color when he joins. And there we go. So he was immediately tagged. I probably should have put some more debug logging in there, but you'll have to take my word for it. He is now it. He's tagged. But what happens if we join with the second player? Well, let's build Steve and have a look. I'm sorry, I'm not looking at chat at all. I have a second window over, so if I'm missing questions, my apologies. So now Steve's host, so he's first one in. He's been tagged. So if I bring Bob in, Bob shouldn't because he's not host. Bob should just start at normal, and he has. We can see each other. We can see the colors are matched because that was an RPC, and it was buffered. As soon as Bob joined, he received this list of RPCs, and one of those RPCs was, "Hey, Steve's been tagged." So it immediately ran that RPC, and that's why we can see Steve is yellow. It ran that buffered RPC. I wasn't even in the server when that was called, so that's why buffered is very useful. Okay, so we actually make this thing a game of tag now. So look at our prefab, make sure everything we might need. We've got a capsule collider, perfect, so we can bump into each other. And we're animating around, so I think we're ready to start making this player into more of a game. So if anybody's familiar with their Unity callbacks, we have our on collision enter. Something's bumped into me. It's basically when this will be called. So we want to, first of all, I guess, we want to check if the thing that hit us is a player. We're not interested in anything else hitting us. So we'll say, okay, we'll try to get the player from them. So we'll call this other player. And that will be the other. So we're starting with the collision. That's not much good. We need to get to that game object. So the collider, that's the component. That's cool. So that means we can get to our get component. And we're looking for a player controller. Whatever we bump into, we'll try to get a player controller from it. Now, if the other player does not equal null, so therefore we did find another player, that means we know we hit the thing. Now we can tag them. This is the gameplay. This is the core of the gameplay. We'll first of all we'll untag ourselves. Actually, I forgot a very, very important thing here. If we're tagged, I want to be tagging everybody if we're not tagged. So if we are currently tagged, we'll have a little check there. Then we'll untag ourselves, and then we'll tag the other player. Simple as that. So that's going to be the same before. It's going to give me another RPC. Again, it's going to be buffered, so anybody joins later will see the most up-to-date picture. So we need to call this on. We're dealing with ourselves now. We have to always deal with the Photon view of the thing we want the method to be called on. So in this case, it's on ourselves. So we just look at our Photon view, call RPC, and I'll give it the name untagged. Tagged. Untagged. On untagged. No, I don't trust myself. There we go. And now we want to make sure this is buffered as well. All things should be buffered in this case. Cool. That's good for that. So we're untagging ourselves. Now we need to tag the other player. Now we need to get the other player's Photon view. Well, we know that player controller inherits from Pun, the Pun monobehavior. So we can say, okay, other player also has a Photon view. So now we're going to be calling this remote method on the other player. So we call RPC. This time it's on tagged, and again with the buffered. So really it's that simple. We're just calling methods around. And now this will be running on the other player, and this will be running on ourselves. So it should cycle that. So let's test it. Hold up, Steve. Now, I don't know where you guys grew up, and even if tag was called tag in the UK, it's called it. But we had a rule called no touchbacks when I was growing up. And I don't know if it's the same. Basically, you can't tag someone back who just tagged you. We'll see that rule immediately violated by Steve or Bob, because we don't take that into account. So Steve's tagged right now and Bob's not. So let's have Steve run over and tag Bob. And there he goes. And I was tagged back immediately because I ran into Bob. I did tag Bob. The RPCs worked perfectly. Everything ran great. But Bob immediately tagged me back because I was still colliding with him. So that's no good. We can't have that. It'll spoil the game. So what I'm going to do is add what I call no touchbacks. So that's the school ground rule we used to follow when I was a kid. And we'll do something similar. So what we want to do is start a simple countdown. When I get tagged, we'll do it here. When I get tagged, I'll start the touchbacks countdown. So I'll have some kind of countdown variable here called touchback countdown. And I'll set that equal to something we can configure. So it'll be, I guess, touchback duration. So how long does this last? Two things to make here. We want this as a field. It'll be a float. And this one we want to be a serialized field, and this will also be a float. Now, I'm not going to bother tidying this up. Okay, so when do we update this thing? It's been set to some kind of value, maybe 2.5 seconds, 3 seconds, whatever. So now this has got a value. We need to start counting this value down because eventually we want to be able to tag the person again. So let's have an update here. Sensible place to put timing code right in an update. So I guess we could say if our touchback countdown timer is greater than 0, then we should reduce it. And we're going to reduce it by how many seconds passed, which will be our time, a delta time. And yeah, so it'll count down until it goes below 0 or becomes 0. Now we can modify our tagging script. Right now we're just simply tagging them if we're already tagged, but now we can do a bit more than that. We can say, and we're not under the no touchbacks rule. And that countdown timer is less than or equal to 0. Now the reason I'm doing less than or equal to 0 is that obviously the chances of this actually hitting 0, given that this is a small number, are slim. So we want to be checking for less than or equal to 0. And if that's the case, then we're good to tag them. So that should fix our touchbacks problem. Let's build it out. So we've so far now used the Photon view method of communication, and we've used RPCs. So we still have one left. We will be using it. I got tagged immediately because I fell on Steve. So, oh, we have a problem here. There's that code is not working. Okay, double with our code I just wrote it. On collision enter is tagged. We just add countdown is less than or equal to 0 is tagged. Now we want an update. We probably don't want to be doing this on only run this for our local player if our Photon view is mine. Don't think that's the cause of the problem, but we do want to be making sure that this is only for our local player, just like we did with all those third-party scripts. Let's run that again and see if I can see more closely what happened. And definitely keep an eye out for any kind of error messages. So I'll make Bob the host in this case. Bob, he's tagged by default because he's the first one in. Let's bring Steve in. Steve is not tagged. Let's put Steve over here. And let's tag him with Bob. Boop. Oh, touchbacks didn't seem to be working. I think I know why. Just like usual, I forgot to set a value on something. Our touchbacks duration is 0. So I need to actually make that take effect. I need to set the touchbacks to some kind of value. I'm going to use 2 seconds. Sorry, Steve, I'm going to have to... oh, actually, I need to build him first. See if that fixes it. Still not 100% sure why both seem to be tagged at once. But we'll leave that for now. Okay. So Bob is tagged. He's first in. Steve comes along. Over here. Now it's Bob's turn. I tag Steve. Poof. Ah, now that time I didn't get tagged back. Steve had to wait 2 seconds. Same with Bob. If I stand right by him, it's not going to touch me back. If I come back after that time, then it will. But I had that 2 seconds kind of amnesty to run away. So that's working. We kind of got a functional game of tag. Pretty exciting. But there's no kind of score or anything. I mean, kind of cool to know like who's winning. And I guess with tag, a game of tag, the person who's winning has been the one who's been tagged the least, I guess. For the sake of this game, whoever's been tagged the least is going to be in the lead. So you can all pick on the person who's been tagged the least. So how are we going to keep track of that? I guess it's going to be pretty straightforward. Again, here in an update, we're in our player controller, so we can simply just keep counting up a number for how long we've been tagged. So again, in this if statement, Photon view is mine. Let's just put some comment in here. Reduce our touchbacks timer, and here we want to if we're tagged. Is tagged, then we'll want to increase total time spent tagged. So we'll have some kind of time spent tagged variable, and I'll just increase that by time.delta. So we'll create that, and that's great. Let's display on the screen now. Let's have it so it's underneath each person's name. There we go, that's an idea. So instead of just displaying their name, what I'll do here is I'll have their name, on the next line, I'll have how long they've been tagged. So we can visually see people's score. So to do that, I'm going to use a substitution string. First, on the first line here, I'm going to put the player's name, then I'm going to drop to a new line. And now I'm going to use a little bit of rich text here. I'm going to use size as 50%. And close that immediately so if I don't forget. And then here I'm going to put the time spent tagged, and I'm going to format that to just 1 decimal place with F1. Not familiar with that, I recommend checking these out. These things are great. And this is also something I only learned recently that TextMesh Pro is more than happy with our size stuff here. So that'll make it not too shabby. Let's have a look. Again, we can test this without running multiplayer. We can just see Bob and see his number count up. Except, oh yeah, it should work. Yeah, it should work. Except it's not. So that's because, okay, wait, let me check that again. And if they're tagged, increase time spent tagged, which I also use here. So update name display. update name display was not being called here. So I need to make sure I update the name display every time that happens. Okay. Let's try again with Bob. There we go. So you have increased the number of time. We should probably put seconds after that or something, just so you can tell what kind of unit we're dealing with. We'll call it sec. All right, that's fine, but let's build it out and see what happens with Steve. Right now, that's just a simple, if you look at our code, that's just a variable that we're keeping track of in our script here. We're not sending it over the network in any way. We're modifying it here, but only if it's our player. So the other players have no idea what this is. They have no way of knowing what that is because we're not sending it over the network. So that's something we have to do just to demonstrate that. We shouldn't see those things sync up. So let's run with Bob. So his is increasing as expected. But if we join with Steve, Steve has no idea. Steve gets to be tagged. Steve's will start to increase. But we can't see that either because Steve's not sending his information. So now we need to use the third and final main way of communicating over networks with with Photon. And that's called their serialization. And this is can be a really powerful one. This is basically effectively creating a custom observable that the Photon view can then observe. But we're in charge of what it decides to serialize and deserialize. So it gives us complete control. This would be really useful for things like, say you had a health bar, maybe you had a score, which is what we're doing here, and things like that. To implement this, we need to implement the Ipun observable interface. So what does that actually want us to create? That wants a single method called onPhotonSerializedView. And this is actually really, I quite like how this works. It's so simple. Like I've worked with very complex networking things before, and this is just very elegant. So basically what you have is a stream. And the stream can be working in both directions. It's so elegant, I'm not even going to bother commenting. If I say, if the stream is writing, I'm writing something to the stream. Therefore, I'm writing to the network, effectively. Then all I need to do is say, oh, hey, stream, send next, and then just give it any value. I'm just going to send it time spent time. That's it. And then in an else statement, therefore I'm not writing, I'm actually reading from the network in this case. Then I can do basically the opposite. I can say, oh, in that case, time spent tagging equals stream dot read, or sorry, receive next. I do need to cast this the correct type because it comes out as an object, so that's a float. All that matters is that these are in the correct order. So if I wanted to also serialize, say the is tagged, that is send next, I also want to serialize is tagged. Maybe we're interested in that. All I need to do here is make sure it's in the same order. So is tagged would equal cast a Boolean this time, stream.receive next. It's really simple, nice and elegant. And there's no real limit of what you can serialize here. So that should be all I need. Now, this has turned this script, Playercontrol, into an observable object. So let's see how that affected our prefab. If we look down here in our Photon view, it's automatically detected and added the player controller to this list of observables. This because it's set to auto find all. Really convenient. So now it's the Photon view is going to take over the bulk of the work and do all the networking for us. All we had to do is implement that simple method there. So let's see if it works. Now, I've had problems with this. So foreboding. Build that. Build Steve up. Oh, I did forget one obvious thing. A few people might have spotted it. Let me cancel that. I forgot. Once I've actually received this on this time, I need to update that name again because every time it changes, the name needs to change. So in here now, let's see how this works. We're hoping I don't run into that one issue I ran into earlier. Let's see if it works. Okay, so Steve's firing up. We'll get Steve in there. So Steve will start counting up, but this time he's broadcasting. He's sending that information. So run Bob. Okay, so I run into the same problem that I ran into before, and now I get another chance to try to fix it. So it's working, but it's not streaming, and I've run into this problem a couple times, and I'm going to figure out once and for all why. So it's working at each end, but it's not receiving it and applying it. So what is missing here? Okay. I do have a piece of reference code that I'm going to try to match just as I can. That doesn't actually, I never actually serialized that one before. So let me try that. Come on, demo gods. Smile on me. So we'll get Steve up and running. There he goes. What we're aiming to see is Steve's number increasing in the next 10 minutes. No dice. We will prevail, though. Update name display. Okay. Updating the name display, so we should be reaching this. So let's put a little bit of friendly debug logging in here. We'll say, okay, this was reached for. I'm going to use the Photon message info. Sender.nickname. I'm going to reach. So I should see. I want to see this code being reached for, well, either the other player, basically. So we'll build that up. Make sure it's closed. It's always those last little details that get you. So I have 9 minutes of crunch time. Let's get Steve in there. There he is. No dice. No logging, interestingly. So that's interesting. The logging is not actually receiving this for that player. So I'm wondering, instead I try it of an else, I'm going to try looking at steam.isReading. Curious if that's the same as the else. I would say this bit's fiddly, but I honestly don't think it is. I think I'm missing some small nuance to it. Okay, let's get Steve in. Bring Bob in. No. Okay. So if I'm just seem like I'm doing nothing, it's because I'm looking at my reference code here. Maybe I'll look at the chat, see if anybody's got any suggestions. No. I should be so lucky. Okay. So the problem lies here. The problem lies in that this is not running for our other clients. So on serialized view, is the writing running, I wonder? And we'll call this writing 4. This will be reading 4. I imagine this doesn't need testing writing anyway, if without another player in there. So I'm not getting any I got 6 minutes. Plenty of time. Who's worried? So no logging on either side. I'm curious now if my observable is actually being observed. So let me look at my prefab again. I'm definitely seeing this player controller being detected. So the player controller. Name display initial color, untagged, update. update. It's my control. The thing I did change is I didn't have this inside. I constantly updated the name on update. I wonder if, no. Yeah, that's the case, but you can never. That's how you get it. I mean, we have a functional game of tag here. It's just missing a score. And look at that. Now it's working. But I can only theorize to what I've just done to fix it there. But my theory is very tenuous, because all I did is move this outside of that, outside of this if mine check. So more research required on that. I think that's just pretty much the same problem I encountered before. So more research is required. We have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to very quickly add the who's got the highest score. I'm going to color the person's name in green. If they've got the lowest time, we want everybody to run after them, because it'd be easier than looking for them. So we need to check here, update name display. What we want to do is a little bit of fancy code here. If this player is winning, so we'll do a var is winning. And this is going to be a little bit of fancy. It's going to be using, I'm going to find all of the objects in the scene that are player controllers. So that's all of the game players in the scene. We're going to order those by, so we're using a bit of a link here. I'm going to order them by their time spent tagged. That's ordering ascending, so the lower will be the top, so we can grab the first one of those. So that's the first person, and if that first person is equal to this person, we know this person's winning. So now we can say, if we're winning, then let's do something a little different. If they're not winning, we'll do that. I could do this all in one line, but it'll be ugly. I'd rather do it this way. So what I'm going to do is just color their name. So color equals green. So color their name green. So you can see at a glance who's winning. And there's one more thing I wanted to add, but we can always, that is if someone is tagged and yes, they leave the game by closing their window, it finds somebody else, but that's not critical. That's just a small addition. Oops, I did it again. Steve's still running. So if this works, we've got a game of tag in just under an hour and a half. We'll need minimal head scratching. And I can finally read some of your comments. Okay, Steve's going in first. He's winning because he's the lowest scorer, which is true. He's the only guy there. But as soon as Bob joins, that shouldn't be the case anymore. Yep, Steve immediately isn't winning. So Steve chases down Bob. Boom. Bob's now still winning, but if that score climbs about 13 seconds, then Steve will be winning. There we go. Fully networked game of, obviously, the UI can use some work. The level could use some work. Everything could use a bit of work. I can fly. Didn't show you that off, though. Kind of a bit of cheat there. That's, yeah. I will make a build in a moment while we do QA, and maybe if I get a chance, I'll throw it up. Throw that build up online, and we see if you can all play a multiplayer game together. But let me just stop my screen share for the moment. I can figure out how to do that. I'm going to take a breather. I'm going to let Steph take over for a second.
Hey, thank you so much, Cash. I do see there's some people commenting in the chat there with what you were looking into in that code section there. So take a peek there. But you know what, guys? I said we might not have enough time to do a Q&A, but I got nothing else scheduled for the rest of the day. Cash, how does your calendar look like today? Is that all
good
good?
To go, man. I'm good to go.
Beauty. You know what? Let's go through those questions then. But before I do continue on, I'm going to toss in a poll here. And I'd love to know how you all had enjoyed this workshop and webinar. It really helps us to know whether we should continue doing these workshops and hosting it for you all. Maybe even a part 2. I do see that, who was it? Was it Andri and Anil wanted a potential part 2 to this. So if you all enjoyed it, we'll definitely look into scheduling a part 2 here. But I'm going to toss in a poll, and please do let us know on a scale of 0 to 10 in the polls tab, just for you all to know. There's chat, questions, and a polls tab. So check out that polls tab there. But on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being you wouldn't tell anyone about this, 10 being you would recommend this workshop to others, let us know how you had enjoyed it on a scale of 0 to 10. It would help us out a lot. Toss it into the polls tab there. And I do thank you all again for joining us on this workshop and webinar. So I myself, I'm just going to take 2-3 minutes to wrap things up, offer some resources should anyone be interested in taking this to the next level, or maybe joining Cash to explore some of the projects further. But with that, for those of you who are more so beginners, but still stuck around to this workshop, right on, good for you. We do have an XR development with Unity course for those who are just getting started with AR and VR, looking to cover some C# fundamentals. It's a 10-week program, 4 hours per week for a total of 40 hours. Our next course begins on April 27th. It's held every 2.5 months, so lots of opportunities to join us. And the price of this is $39.50. Now, this does include and come in as a bundle. The 10-week course, a 3-week C# and a Quest 2 headset at $39.50 for anyone just getting started and wanting to potentially take this further. Now, for those of you who are more advanced and have stuck around here, thank you again for sticking around. We do have our XR Project Accelerator course, and this is for our more advanced students and learners, those who have created VR and AR projects before, confident and strong in C# and in Unity as well. Now, this is 8 weeks long, 5 hours per week, 2 1.5-hour sessions with 2 private one-on-one mentorship sessions each week, where you can sit down with guys like Cash or other of our instructors to really bounce ideas off of each other and accelerate your projects over the 8 weeks with us. Now, we have one starting on May 24th, held every 2.5 months as well, and the price is $44.50 for this, coming in as a bundle as well. So you've got the Accelerator, the C# and a Quest 2 headset that is a part of this course. So if you're interested, feel free to check out our website, download the syllabus. You can chat with myself, Kyle, or Brendan for more about these courses and programs. So, and we'd love to chat more about that there. Now, if you want to split it up into some monthly installments, we have our 3-month plan, a 6-month plan, and a 12-month plan for both of those courses. Give us a shout. Love to chat to you all, see what you're interested in talking about, maybe exploring, developing yourselves, and if it is a good fit for you there. So download our syllabus or even apply now at circuitstream.com/learning or course. We'd love to chat with you all there. There's myself, my colleague Kyle in the chat, our colleague Brendan as well, who are here to help answer any questions you have. But, without further ado, let's get into all these questions here, Cash. I'm going to toss them up one by one. And with this, before I get into that, I see Andri, you had asked the question there if we do consulting. We do have private sessions just available outside of the courses as well, one-on-one where you sit down, get some consultation there. So Kyle will reach out to you to speak to that there. But I'm going to order the questions by upvotes here. So if you all have any questions that would like to be upvoted, feel free to do those there. It looks like all of them are sitting at about 1 upvotes. So let me go back to date. So what hasn't been answered? What's the oldest one? So for you, Cash, this one's for you. What is the difference? And this is from Janos. What is the difference between discrete and continuous when sending the animations, when you were in Unity kind of playing with those filters there?
I can't answer that with 100%, but I can give you a very educated guess. Given how Unity operates its collision detection system, if you were to have, say, a thin a thin, I'll just very quickly go through this. If you have a thin surface and something moving very quickly, one frame it might be in front of the surface, the next frame it might be behind it. It'll never detect that collision, so it'll move clean through it. So I suspect if it's in an animation context, discrete is probably descending like that, descending what's the animation in this frame, what's the animation in this frame. I suspect a continuous animation will make sure that if something was missed between those two frames, some kind of transition was satisfied in your animation controller, it'll catch those better. That's what I suspect it is. So I have to do a little bit more research to confirm it. But if you're using the same nomenclature as Unity, that's what I would guess.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Cash. And my apologies if I mispronounce your name, guys. I'm going to do my very best here. This one's from Kel. And Kel is asking, how many objects is it reasonable to sync over the PUN or PUN? Say if you have physics objects that are affected by the players.
I think this is a question that's kind of agnostic to PUN itself. How many physics objects is it reasonable to simulate on any networking engine? And that really depends on obviously your metrics, like what's your bandwidth, what's your latency, and then you're going to have to, and there's going to be a limit. There's going to be an upper limit depending on, like, if everybody's sitting on a 1 gigabit connection running a fast computer, it should be fine with thousands and thousands of physics objects, but that's not realistic. So I think with PUN and any networking engine, it's more how do you mitigate that problem? Like, what's important to the player? If you have thousands and thousands of physics objects that you want to be replicated to the player, you need to prioritize. You need to say which ones are close by the player, which ones have been sitting still for a while, therefore they can be considered asleep. A lot of this stuff is already supported by the Unity engine. You can detect if a rigid body is asleep, and then you could calm down its any kind of serialization that's happening there. I suspect PUN's probably doing a lot of that for us already for any rigid body networking. But it really does boil down to mitigating, like getting as close to the experience you want without sending all this data. For it's simple as things like if I'm facing away, there could be this helicopter exploding behind me, Hollywood style, but I'm facing that direction. I'm I'm way too cool to be facing that direction. So all the physics and explosions and everything that's happening behind me, I don't need to know about it. I'm too cool. So you don't need to send me that information. So it's taking those kind of considerations, which go. It's the same considerations for PUN as it is any networking engine. You have to consider those. You can certainly accomplish usually more than you think you can if you're a little bit smart about it.
Perfect. Yeah, I hope that helps out, but do let us know if there's anything else, Kale, that we can answer for you there. So it looks like we've got some upvotes for some other questions. So I'll start with the upvoted ones. This one, let's see which one's the oldest upvoted one. Looks like it's this one from James. Now, James was asking, can the host role be changed to another person during the game?
Yes.
Say someone with, so that's a yes, eh? Perfect.
Carry on, sorry.
Yeah, no. So say someone with a poor internet connection comes in first, then someone else with high quality connection joins after.
Yeah. So completely. That master client that we saw me use several times there, that's initially the person who started the host of the game. But the master client is seamless. It will. If I bothered, I was going to put that. You saw me briefly think about it. Adding the escape key to drop back to menu, I was going to use it to demonstrate. If you leave a room, even as the host, Photon will automatically choose the next best person and make them the master client. Now, you can intercept that and have some control over that. You can manually do it, but Photon already has stuff in place to automatically shift that. And you can add your own logic, obviously, if you had the host had a poor internet connection, and they were responsible for a lot of, say, the sanity checking, the cheat prevention for your game logic, then you could have it so it automatically passes that responsibility on to somebody else. So you have control over it, but it does also handle all that automatically.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. That makes sense. Then we have one from Anil here, and Anil had joined us for our VR bowling workshop and actually created his own VR bowling experience. So stemming off of that, how would one turn, multiplayer game for, say, the bowling game that we did, where there's only one lane but multiple players? How would you approach that?
How did you turn-based multiplayer game for a bowling game when you have multiple players? Okay. I guess in terms of the networking of things like that would be an interesting problem, because you would definitely not want to. You can't resort to pure physics. You can't expect physics to run identically on all these different machines. Someone might have a slower machine. Physics skip a frame and therefore do something different. So you would definitely want to have what's called an authoritative server who's running the physics, and they're the one that who decides what pins fall down. That could be the master client. It could be done through a voting system. I think Pwn supports these things, or you can code your own. But in terms of sharing the lane with players, you probably just have some kind of views. You probably use RPC saying, if you're in team A, then you would have the server could say, okay, team A, could be its own Photon view, saying, fire an RPC saying, okay, your turn's over. So then that's Photon view script, that script controller script, whatever team controller script, could then say to all of its players, okay, just switch to a different camera, like the viewing camera, and sit down or something, have a beer or whatever. And then the other people take their go. You probably end up using a lot of the serialization that I used briefly there at the end to transmit a lot of, like especially for things like chat or whatnot. So I think you probably make a lot of use of RPCs and serialization for that. But in terms of physics, to make it accurate and people not complain, so they all see the same pictures, you'd have either replays of what the server saw, or you would at least have the server be the one that gives the final answer on whether it was a strike or a spare.
Perfect. That makes sense. Yeah, Neil, let us know if there's anything else you'd like us to cover for that question. But Tom, I see you in the chat there working on your bowling game as well. That's awesome. Perfect. So just going back to the questions tab here, we've got one from Cormac. And Cormac is asking, how difficult is to add in a lobby choosing system with Pun? So if I join a game and I can search for an open game, does Pun provide service for this?
It completely does. In fact,
nice.
You almost have to go out of your way to avoid it. You'll notice when I was joining a room. I was trying to keep it as simple at the menu end as possible, so I could fit this into the time I had. But you can certainly say, give me a list of all of the available lobbies, and you could join a lobby for your region. It could be a lobby for a certain game type, and that would give you a bunch of rooms that are ready. And how many players are inside each room. Maybe the rooms have different restrictions or different custom properties. The whole idea of custom properties, which I didn't touch on here. So you could have like game modes and different settings for your server, and that would be something you could filter on. Yeah, there's a lot of support for that stuff in there. And there's some excellent tutorials in the documentation too, going through all of that stuff, the stuff I basically skipped.
Well, hey, part 2 may be coming up, eh?
Yeah.
We'll get it rolling. Great question, though, Cormac. Thank you. Then we've got one here from Leo. And Leo's asking, can you use Pun completely for free in a finished game, or are there restrictions in the free version?
There are no restrictions to the free version. The only restriction I am aware of, and I would go as far as saying, you can quote me on this, is that with the free version, you can only have what they call 20 CCUs, concurrent users, CUUs. Okay, it's basically a unit of measurement they have. You can only have 20 people using your app at once, at any one time. And if you have the paid for version through the Unity Asset Store, for instance, which is $95 last I checked, that ups that number to 100 for 1 year. So it's not a huge upgrade. Basically, when you want to go and want to get commercial with your project, then you want to start looking at how much those cost. And last I checked, they were reasonable prices. I think they're not like if your game was turning a profit for a free to play game, utterly free to play, like with no kind of any microtransactions, then obviously you would be out of pocket. But for any game that's turning over some degree of money, the fees per user seem reasonable. They're in order of some cents per month per user.
That makes sense. Yeah, I know Jerry also mentioned it's about 20 users or so for that free version, so it makes sense. Yeah, hopefully that helps out, Leo. But thank you for the question there. I got another one from Iman, and Iman's asking, can you also work this through a HoloLens by chance? Can this be applied for that?
It's a networking framework. So what you can anything Unity can deploy to, you can use Pun with or Photon with. I mean, you can run it in the web browser if you want. It's really doesn't mind what the end device is.
Right.
As far as I'm aware, there are no platform limitations with Photon.
Okay,
yeah, you're good to go there.
Seems like a very strong tool that I only heard about yesterday when we were talking about this stuff. But got to do some research on my end there. Let's see if there's any other higher rated questions there.
There's a bunch of people talking about a voice tutorial.
Yeah.
Photon, I don't know. I'd have to Google it. If it has native voice, but I've seen a lot of tutorials online that combine Photon with this voice thing. And that's something I wouldn't mind doing one on myself, maybe doing a VR chat clone or something in an hour and a half.
Yeah, we could do it. Beauty. And
maybe
then
let's 45 for that
one. Lovely. So let's see what other questions. So it looks like they're all fairly upvoted. So this one's from Roderick, but it was stemming off of a question that Anil had as well. So I'm going to pop open Roderick's question, but I'm going to try and find Anil's as well. So Anil was asking, so Anil's initial question was, so why are we not running those updates if it is not quote unquote mine? And I guess this is stemming off that, picking up on what Anil was saying, would it be better, not be better to destroy those scripts for remote prefab so you don't need to evaluate those things every
That's a very good question. That's potentially a solution to this. Those scripts, there was 4 or 5 of them in total. I was not willing to go through and try to find every possible side effect it could have to remove those scripts. I don't believe there would be any. So I thought, well, there's 2 reasons I did use the approach I did. One is I did want to demonstrate that you can port existing code. You can take something that's quite complex and inject those bales basically in places that it doesn't make sense for a remote player, and have it still work. If you could evaluate those scripts more closely and determine there are no side effects, I can safely delete the script, then by all means, that's probably a much better solution. But it's good to know that you can still kind of chop them up in little pieces if you want and make it work that way. If you have domain knowledge of those scripts, then another good solution.
Perfect. Great question there, Roderick. Thank you. Then we've got one here from Jacob. Jacob, great seeing you again, my man. Jacob's asking, can I use a switch statement to tag someone? Store as a IceTag statement and change color accordingly. Would that be easier?
A switch statement to tag somebody. I'm not entirely sure you mean a switch statement in C#. Store an isTag statement and change color accordingly. Not quite sure what you mean by using a switch statement there. Because a switch statement is generally used to switch on a variable and then operate certain code depending on different values of that. I'm sure there is a way that I'm not envisaging that you could do it that way, but I think I'd have to see an example for that.
Right. Yeah, Jacob, shoot us a message on Slack or whatnot, because we'd be more than happy to explore this further. But yeah, hopefully this kind of helped. But give us a shout if not. We're always happy to help there. What else do we got here? So this one's from Lee Walker, and he was asking, how much more is this involved to if the app is VR? So I guess, and if I'm not mistaken, if put it into a VR experience, what other kind of work is there for that?
I would say it is more involved because you just have to have different considerations. For instance, the presentation here of a third-person player with an animator on it is very easily in the wheelhouse of what Photon does out of the box. Using that transform view and the animator view got me everything I needed to have people running around with animations right off the bat. But with VR, what are we representing of the other person? If it's a single-player VR experience, what are we even showing? Are we showing some disembodied hands? Are we showing also our head? Generally not in the third person, in a single-player experience. If it's a VR experience, what do we want to see of the other person? If it's just some floating hands and a head, then not really much more to it. Really, it's just, again, you just have those tracked pose drivers or whatever you're using to control the controllers in the head, and then you put Photon views on each one of those and have your transforms and potentially animation views, observables on those. If you wanted to go a bit more in depth and have a character that has limbs and everything's connected, then you're dealing with IK, and you probably want to do some more custom observables to handle that. So it really depends on what you want what you want to see the other person look like, I think, in VR.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. There are some additional steps required, right? But No, great question there, Ali. So there's where is it? Janosch's question. So I'm going to start with Janosch's question because Jim has another question following up on that one. And Janosch was asking, how many messages are we using with the game of tag in its state right now?
Okay, how many messages are we using? So I guess that's kind of drilling down into the core of how Photon does its networking. And off the top of my head, it sends, I believe, for the observables, I believe it's sending 20 messages a second by default. These are configurable values. Because there's a lot going on in the hood. This is why Photon is incredibly easy to use. It's sending. You can scale that down even further, and it'll interpolate between. If it hasn't heard from the player for 200 milliseconds, it'll estimate what's going on in that time using the previous information that was received. I'm pretty sure there is a debug display somewhere that will allow me to dump those stats. But if you're asking for like what kind of bits per second we're dealing with here, what kind of bandwidth we're dealing with, I would imagine not very much. There's some pretty smart stuff going on in Photon to not send too much duplicate data. If my player's standing perfectly still, it's not going to be pumping out 20 vector threes of my position that are the same every second. It's not going to be doing that. It really depends on like how active the game is and stuff too. So I think investigation would be needed. But I would estimate this game right here, not much at all.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Janosch. And then this one's piggybacking on Janosch's question there. Is there a way to see how many messages are being sent?
I'm sure there is. Off the top of my head, I don't know it. That Photon, I mean, I could pop over. I'm now genuinely curious. Is there a Photon network dot? There's going to be some object that's just full of stats. I know it. There's so much stuff in your head. So there's a lot of statistics objects. Network statistics enabled. There's like objects that are pissing statistics. So yeah, I think you're taken care of there.
Perfect. Wonderful.
You your own UI for it though.
Okay. Hopefully that helps out there, Jim. Let's see what other questions. We got another upvoted one by Ken. Ken's asking, is there a Photon-specific audio solution you would recommend?
Not that I'm aware of. Photon seems to have chosen their hill, and they're dying on it pretty well. So I don't think they. I mean, a quick Google Photon voice would be a good one. We're talking about audio. I suspect you mean voice, VoIP, in which case I don't think they do support that. I can spell Photon. I am going to do a quick search of voice. I might be wrong. I'm going to drop a link in chat here, worth investigating.
Yeah, Lee was also just commenting, if you look at the SDK, like on their site, they have a free audio chat. So
yep, I'm taking it all back now. It seems they've got a fairly well-developed voice solution. So what do I know? I'll just pretend they invented it yesterday.
Awesome. Hey, thank you, Ken.
Maybe there's another workshop on that one right there.
Right. There's got to be, man. Everyone was loving this one. For you, we'll do it. Perfect. Let's see if there's any uploaded ones because it keeps changing here. Wonderful. So let's do James here. So James's question was, can we switch host duties to that person mid-game, since they'd presumably be handling the RPC calls, maintaining state, etc., among all players, in case a bunch more people connect?
Can we switch host duties to that person mid-game? I'm not sure who you mean by that person. You can switch. You can switch who's the master client, therefore the host, to mid-game based on your own logic, or automatically if they disconnect. In terms of how the RPC calls and everything's handled, there is a degree of peer-to-peer going on here. I'm led to believe. Again, I haven't dug into what they'll show me of the source code.
Right.
I haven't decompiled the thing yet, but give me time.
Oh, but you know what? So and James just mentioned it in the chat, and I just put it together right now when he mentioned it. So it's a two-part question. So the first question he had, I guess there wasn't enough space to fill it up, was can the host role be changed to another person during the game? So the poor internet connection comes in first, someone comes in with high quality, joins after. This is the follow-up question, can we switch host duties for that person mid-game? I'm assuming the one that joins in high quality later, right?
Yeah, you can, and that would have to be a decision that you'd make as a developer, because you're dealing with trust issues at that point. Because if you've always gonna have cheating in the back of your head, depending on what kind of game you're making. If someone's a cheater and they just decide to rock up on this game with a really, really, really fast connection and just like immediately get told you're the server, they can do a lot of gnarly stuff to a game. So obviously you'd want some kind of logic in place at your end of when do you delegate those responsibilities. Is it a smart move? Is it someone who's trusted? Is it someone perhaps it's a moderator of this server or something like that?
That makes sense. Hey James, thanks for letting me on to chat. Never would have thought that was a two-part question, so thanks for highlighting that there. Makes a lot more sense now, definitely. Then we've got a question. Let's see, got a lot to go through. This is great. One from, let's go to the older ones just in case they've been kicking back for a while. This one's from John. John's asking, OVR camera rig versus XR interaction. What's the advantage? Which one works better for Oculus Quest?
I'm not a VR developer. I just make networking workshops. I'll be honest with you, I don't use OVR camera much anymore. I tend to lean toward I'm using Oculus XR plugin with its track pose drivers and whatnot. And XR to interaction is something I'm now getting more into. This is a very subjective question, though. It really depends on. One is OVR camera is a little bit on the aged side, so it's more mature in that sense. XR interaction toolkit is still trying to find its legs to a degree. Mm-hmm. And this is true of a lot of XR in general. It's a lot of frameworks and libraries that are kind of jousting for that top spot and to become like the main adopted thing. So you have a lot of people stepping on each other's toes, and for developers, it's been a bit of a headache. And that's why I find it really difficult to answer which one's best for something, because it's changing so quickly.
Right.
My only suggestion would be try both. And not only make a decision based on which you feel is the best right now for you, for your project, because again, it really depends on what your project is, but also try to look to the future, because these things are moving. They are moving targets, and they are changing a lot. Try to keep an eye on roadmaps, and if things are being deprecated slowly, just keep an eye on, keep your finger on the pulse, because this is a really fast-moving corner of the industry.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, John. Now, happy to answer more questions. I've got time. I've been told, and hopefully it doesn't happen, that after 2 hours, sometimes this will just shut off or shut down completely. So if we disappear, everyone, it's the platform we're using. I'm hoping that we'll be able to continue on after 2-3 minutes when at the top of the hour. But let's keep some questions going on here.
If that does happen, I want to thank everybody for this experimental workshop. I know it was a little bit rough around the edges, but I'm glad you stuck around for most of it.
No, it was lovely. It was awesome.
Thanks,
catch,
guys.
and yeah, you're a beast. Thank you for leading this. Let's see. So we've got some more upvoted ones here. This one's from Vicente. Vicente. Is it possible to have an admin report of each player actions or status at the end of the times game? So times tagged and the total time as a tagged player, for instance.
Yeah, there's this concept that I didn't demonstrate or really spend much time with of this whole customs property. They're these kind of hash sets of custom properties that you can apply to rooms. To players, I believe even lobbies have them. So it allows you to attach a lot of metadata to pretty much any object. But I don't think you can go as far as putting it on a particular, say, Photon view, but you can certainly put it on a connection, which is basically a player, or a room itself. So I think for tracking that kind of metadata, you could certainly do that in that case. And what I'm not sure of is, does it have persistence? Does it persist between different games? And that's something I wouldn't be surprised if there's a solution for that. If it's not, maybe it's already there and you just go player.save to cloud. It might be that simple. I don't know because I haven't investigated, but there is definitely an avenue of research that I like to look into myself as well, of those custom properties.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Awesome. Let's see other questions here. Andri, we got the voice tutorial for voice. We'll be sure to cover that in another workshop or take it offline here. Janosch, another question from Janosch. Am I right when I feel like Photon is hard to use when aiming for up to 100 player per session when looking at a 500 messages maximum per session limitation by Photon, if he's informed correctly?
I've not seen this 500 messages per second maximum, but I've not looked for that number either. So that's no surprise really. So it's 500 messages per second maximum. So I guess at this point you have to. Well, this is why I put my hacker hat on. So what constitutes a message? Because if a message is sending like I was doing, sending God knows how many times a second, whether someone's still tagged or not, that's a giant waste of messages. If a message could be sending a piece of text, well, then you can jam a JSON blob in there, and then you can pack a ton of information into one message. So, I mean, if the limitation is that, if it's just messages per second, I'm pretty sure you could be pretty cheeky with that limit. And that wouldn't, I mean, that's 5 messages per player per second. But realistically, a lot of players, depending on the game, a lot of players are standing still or not doing a hell of a lot. Or if they are, even a first-person shooter, when you're running in a direction, you're quite often running in straight lines for a long time. And you really don't need to update that running direction until you've actually changed direction. So how much of that is Photon's is optimizing for you, so you cuts that message count down is a different question. Whether it's a conflict of interest for them to do that if they have this limit. I don't know. I think it's a very good question that I'd love to do some more research on. All I know is there's a lot of pretty. I guess realistically, you're not going to make an MMO with this game with Photon. Photon will get you well past the prototype stage of any game, up to the point where you find its hard limitations, and at that point, hopefully, you've got those hard limitations will come with. It's like one of those good problems to have. You're going to run into those limitations when you've grown enough, and you have a player base big enough that you can't. Photon's not good enough anymore. At that point, you've got a player base that's good. That's too much for Photon. So you can at that point start to afford to build on it.
Right.
And what I do like about it, I don't want to stretch this question out too much. What I do like about it is I have a lot of experience with different networking approaches and systems. And the idea of this serialization and RPGs and all of the RPCs and all of these different approaches they're taking are very much industry standard. These are not new approaches. They're not doing anything weird that would make it difficult to move away to a different kind of networking solution. They're not doing some really new fancy stuff. So it doesn't preclude you from that in the future.
Right. Perfect. Awesome. Hey, great question, Janosch. Good problems to have if you do encounter that, right? As Cash was saying. Let's see. I think we just saw one here. It was something versus something. Where did it go? There it is from John. So John, question from John, Photon Pun versus Normcore. I've heard good things about Normcore. What do you think,
you
Cash?
guys are really pushing me. I have no idea what Normcore. Furiously Googling. Wait a second. Have I just been pranked? Help me. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, well, we could.
Tell if it's a serious question.
Right.
I'm culturally inept. So if it's normcore, then what I think it is, and I've just been what's it called? Pranked. I don't know. well, send me a link of something legit, and I'll take you seriously.
Yeah, shoot it over, John. But great question nonetheless. If it wasn't a prank, send it over. We'll check it out. Well, let's see. We've got some little older ones here. This one's from Michael Height. So Michael, not directly pun related, but are there techniques or add-ons to interface with a cloud engine, example the AWS, to provide the game controller AI logic since it can scale for high performance?
That's an interesting question. By not directly pun related, I'm assuming you're not talking about using some kind of cloud service like AWS to run Pun, because Pun itself, or Photon itself, is its kind of own ecosystem. They run the servers, they run the master server and all that. I don't believe they have a standalone server thing, although I've already been proven wrong with the voice thing, so who knows. But in terms of offloading your control or your heavy lifting logic, any game logic, that's, I mean, certainly possible. Anything is really possible. People more and more in games are starting to almost treat the cloud as like another thread in your engine. If you can present the problem and as these limitations like bandwidth and latency start to drop away over time, then you can almost start treating the cloud as your backyard. It's almost part of your machine, and you can say, like, I got this really, really complicated pathfinding logic to work out, or some sort of solution. It's a big AR problem. I don't want to bog down my game right now. I'm just going to pop that in a queue and let AWS handle it. I'll get back, and maybe it'll get back in a few seconds, maybe. And so, yeah, more and more, I think we're seeing the cloud treated as part of your engine almost, and that's only going to get more pervasive, I think, over the years or months. And
or months.
So yeah, it's an interesting problem to investigate. There is like offloading discrete pieces of your game logic out into cloud surfaces, which would be unheard of a number of years ago. But now it's like, yeah, why not? That's a totally viable, scalable approach. Let's do it.
Right. Yeah, well, hopefully that helps out there, Michael. But do give us a shout if there's anything else we could cover for you. And for you, Cash, so Anil and Andri did send some Normcore.
Oh God, I
links
wasn't
in
praying.
the chat
Thank
there.
God. Thank you. Look, anybody else search for Normcore, you'll see what I'm talking about. Normcore. Okay, I'm glad this wasn't something else because I do love myself a good. Oh, hang on, this has got a. Oh, it's got a login wall. No, it's not. Philosophy game client. So this looks like an analog to Pun or to Photon.
Yeah, supposedly there's lots of
at a
good things
glance, it looks like an analog, which means due diligence. I guess it needs to be investigated and used. If I was to, I mean, it's the first I've heard of it. And what I would do, and this is at a glance too, I mean, maybe doing some pretty nifty stuff that's Pun is not. The first question would be, is this thing okay? It's got a pricing tab, so interesting. They have unlimited, so they're not doing concurrent users. They're doing a bandwidth limitation. It seems like a very similar business model, so I would imagine it's probably a pretty close analog. So at this point, I would deal with it as a due diligence problem. I'd probably try to make the same prototype. For me, I would make the same tag prototype in Normcore and weigh it up. Probably something a bit more advanced than the tag game, but
right.
Definitely. Thank you for pointing that out, though, because I will investigate that seriously.
Yeah, another tool in the tool belt for you.
Yes.
Do a workshop around that later on.
We can do a Photon versus Normcore grudge match.
The ultimate showdown. Beauty. So let's see. I know there's still some questions hanging around here. This one's from Tom. Tom was asking, can you add users who can just watch outside the limit of the concurrent users?
Yeah, and I think you totally could. And I think this is where so I didn't send more than just the player name when their user was connecting, and that's actually kind of built into Photon as a nickname. It's not really anything special. Whereas these custom properties, you could certainly, for instance, if you had a game where you joined and the first screen was like a loadout screen, so you can choose your class and maybe some weapons or some abilities or inventory or whatever, that would be your kind of configuration screen, and then you would say ready to play or jump in. At that point, you would have populated some kind of custom properties about yourself, which would include all of the weapons and classes and so on. There's nothing stopping you from having a flag in that custom property saying, I'm a spectator, I'm just watching. You'd never have to leave the lobby, perhaps, and perhaps like you could then still allow maybe that spectator could still have some input on the game, like a voting system or some kind of asymmetric multiplayer kind of game mechanic. But yeah, a lot of that's a design question. The engine itself, Photon would completely support that.
Right.
Having different types of players serving different roles, which pretty much what the difference between a spectator and an active player is totally in there and supported.
Okay, that makes sense. Perfect. Hopefully that helps out there. And then Andri did make a comment about Photon and Normcore as well. So Normcore is a competitor to Photon, yes, and they are claiming to have better voice, but the Photon was developed by Skype team, just so you know their cash.
Yeah, I mean, I always take those claims with a like an assault mine because yeah, I mean the competitors. This is where it all boils down to due diligence. You make a decently challenging little prototype, something more challenging than this simple game of tag that incorporates what you want from your game, that your main project. So you get your voice in there. You've got spectation, for instance. Get it all in there, and just to build it with both. And just really make a choice from that. I mean, obviously there's going to be financial considerations and other licensing issues, but you have to do your research because you can never fully trust the testimonials. Call me a cynical old bastard, fine, but I prefer to make my own choices.
We'll let you all know. We'll let you all know what cash comes about.
No, now you made me the source of all.
The source of truth, cash. Beauty. When we have a question here from Harold, and Harold was asking, can you easily serialize whole objects or only primitives?
There really is no distinction in what you serialize. You place a photon view on a game object, and it comes with some of those simple observables out of the box, like the transform and the animator one that I used. But that's a game object. That game object could have any number of children. It doesn't even have to have children. It could just be some kind of abstract game object with a photon view on it that's just sending data around. I mean, one of them might be you might have a chat controller object with a chat script on it, and it's got a photon view, which means you can send it RPCs, and that's your entire chat system. I mean, it's not really a primitive object in any sense. It's just an empty game object that's serving a purpose. So really, photon views, whilst I was using them to represent physical things in the world, there certainly isn't any distinction between what kind of objects they represent, whether they're whole, like a articulated robot, or just a cube. I mean, it's up to you.
Beauty. Hopefully that helps out, Harold. But great question there. We have one question here from Cormac as well.
Oh, actually,
sorry. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I want to roll back to that question. I just had a thought. Do you mean complex objects versus primitive data types? I'll quickly touch on that because I think that may have been the question. Serializing is limited to primitive data types, and you would have to kind of build upon it a little bit. If that was your question, because that's a totally different question and equally important. So
yeah, let us know in the chat, Harold, if you're still kicking around there. Let us know if that's what you had meant. Maybe Andri potentially knows as well. But as we're waiting for Harold here, I do have a question open, and this question was from Cormac. Cormac was asking, does Photon provide a backend management tool to monitor lobbies in live games?
I don't know. I think their dashboard does. I'm going to have a peek at it again. I really haven't looked too much into. Oh, they do self-hosting. Look at that. Cool. So there's more consideration too. They allow you to do self-hosted stuff too.
Right.
So, yeah, but let me just look at. There does seem to be some degree. So if I look at my stats here, I'm not seeing a lot of information on my dashboard. Analyze. It definitely shows you concurrent players. So I can see my graph over the last few hours of my concurrent players bouncing between 0 and 2 as I was developing that. But it doesn't seem to show much more than that in terms of analytics. So that might be something you'd have to add yourself.
Beauty. And then Harold did get back to us in the chat here. Yes, perfect. I was talking about primitive data types.
Okay, cool.
Thanks for the clarification. But then Andri had also a question there. What about Lambda and serialization?
Do you mean, okay, do we ever talking about Lambda is in the web service or Lambda is in Lambda expressions in code? I think I need to clarify that one.
So we'll see if he'll get back to us in the chat here as he's typing. I'll also scan through any unanswered questions. Expression.
Lambda expressions. Do you mean so the serialization I was showing was doing that simple stream dot send next, and that would take an object. That's as far as I went with that. Where do you see a lambda fitting in there? Do you see it fitting in place of that object, so it's something that's cold? I'm intrigued by this question because it might have been something interesting I'm not thought of.
Mm-hmm. God, this camera.
I do love lambda expressions. Adding a function to the primitive. I think I probably need to see a snippet of what you're suggesting, because I'm intrigued, but I'm not quite sure where in that serialization you would see that lambda living.
Perfect. So he's typing. Not sure if it's to your response or Daon's there.
Or you can hop on stage. Yes, no, that's the solution.
Just a sec. Perfect. So as we're waiting there, I do know we have just a few questions left here that we could touch on.
Mm-hmm.
So here's one from Vicente. Oh, I almost deleted the question from Vicente.
Oh.
Now this was for, I believe, being tagged. Would both be on collision enter, or would it be split? Tagged ourselves on enter and tag other player on collision exit, so the players do not collide at the same time.
Yeah, I consider that. I think I know what you're saying. So send the RPC for tagging the other, untagging ourselves, I suppose. Untag on enter and then tag on exit. That's a possibility, but I don't think it would solve the problem of that touchbacks thing, because they'd be receiving the same messages.
Mm-hmm.
It may, because you're kind of reversing the order that the message would be sent for the other person. They would attempt to untag themselves first and then tag you. But I think you'd still end up with, if you put some checking in place on the tagging, saying, hey, am I already tagged? Or, hey, are they even allowed to tag me? The problem is the RPC is not actually receiving any parameters. So you have to kind of find those yourself. I'm sure there is a way of passing parameters to an RPC, but again, because that's going down the wire, that would have to be something that's probably primitive types that can be serialized easily. So what you suggest, I think, is an approach, but would probably need still need some good checks in there. I went with the simplest approach I can think of, and that's having a touchback timer, mostly because I remember that as a kid. But yeah, I think there's definitely a solution there. I think we need just playing around with it a bit.
Right. Perfect. Hopefully that helps out, Vicente, but do give us a shout. Let's see what else we got. So there was, gotcha, check if players tagged work.
So
Beauty.
Back in line equals lambda. Yeah, I mean, I'm familiar with lambdas. I'm just curious in what context you're bringing them in with serialization.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Cool. So as we explore that, there's a question here from Ali as well. So Ali, if you're still with us, thanks for the question. Question is, can you make a new script file with variable and serialize and pass the entire script back and forth, almost like a serialized class in Java?
This is a question close to my heart. Right? I'm a huge fan of moddable games. I'm also a massive fan of games that can be modified while they're being played. And the idea that you could send a script back and forth, if this is what you're asking, if you can send a script back and forth and then run it around the game by other people, is completely possible, because effectively you're just sending a string. And at that point, you would use a scripting language, whether it's Lua or Iron Python. You can even use the Rosetta compiler for C# and run it straight in C#. You could run a JavaScript backend on there. So yeah, if you're talking about sending code around and running it, I mean, obviously there's the whole world of security issues to consider. But if I can't. This is again, this is kind of agnostic to Photon. It's just the messenger. Mm-hmm. What you do with that string on the other end is totally doable, I think. So if you're talking about sending code around and running it at runtime, then go for it.
Beauty.
More power to you, mate.
Yeah, get her done. Get her done. Awesome. So we'll finish that up there. And then we've got, so normcore networking. Someone was suggesting to Google that when we thought it was a prank. John, joking around, said it was a prank, couldn't help himself, but it turns out it wasn't.
I'm too culturally inept for this. You gotta go easy on me. I don't even know what a meme is.
Beauty. And then here's a question from Kel. Kel, as many other good features, maybe multiplayer functions will be part of Unity sooner or later. What are your thoughts on that, Cash?
I'm going to be polite about this, and I'm going to be. I do speak from some experience when I say this. Is Unity? First of all, Unity has made a networking engine. They had a networking engine. It was in place. It was used very much because it wasn't very fully featured. Unity as a company, in my experience, and this is from friends of mine who work there, and my experience of working with them since the very first versions of Unity, back in God knows when, is that Unity does the best with the editor, but tends to rely on the community to develop really, really solid, like game-changing assets that like not just Photon, but competitors. And if Unity feels like something is absolutely critical to the engine, they'll buy it and they'll incorporate it to Unity. It's happened many times before. The particle system that we have with Unity up till before the effects graph now, that was Shuriken, that was bought by Unity. Text Mesh Pro was bought by Unity. They actually hired the guy for a year to help integrate it. Like a lot of the core things in Unity have been bought that previously used to be assets, and I wouldn't be surprised if Unity at some point, whether it's Photon or something else, thinks that's a wise investment. Mm-hmm. At the moment, they're also very aware that they don't want to step on. They don't want to in their own garden, right? They don't want to. It's good. What's good for their asset, their community. What's good for Photon is good for them. Mm-hmm. It's not essential for them to swallow up everything that they think would be important for Unity. This is also me talking. This is my opinion. As Unity as a business, nobody else's. It's their approach is to pretty much allow the community to grow and don't just like gobble everything up.
Right.
Until they think it's possibly necessary or whatever. Mm-hmm. They try to let people just do what they're doing now. This healthy competition between what I've just learned is Normcore and Photon. This is a healthy competition. And if Unity implemented one of those, that might bring the competition down, because the next thing you know, you're not paying for it anymore. But again, the Photon costs money for servers, and so does the Normcore. So that's something Photon. I don't think Unity is interested in getting into server management.
Mm-hmm. Right. But yeah, Anil, you mentioned UNet. I believe that was it as well. And then Andri, just kind of stemming off of the Lambda stuff. I'm sure you've seen. My bad. It's not possible in C# as Lambda is not primitive, but in Java it is.
You got me pretty excited because I think I kind of had an inkling where you were going with that, but I couldn't quite see how it would fit in a Unity context.
Right.
It's one of those I wish it was supported by the language things.
Awesome. So we've got 2 more questions here, but feel free to toss in some more. Let's take another 7 minutes here, Cash. Sure. So I'm sure you can go grab a drink of water or bite to eat as well.
I need a smoke, that's all. Just cigarettes, mate. It's cool.
So we have one from Janosch again. Cash, do you use your to-do list tattoo actually as a to-do list with a removable marker or something? Super cool tattoo.
I washed it this morning. It was covered in workshop notes. I had a shower this morning. It's clean. I use it on a daily basis.
Oh lordy, you're hilarious, my man.
I'm planning on getting a ruler done down my right index finger as well, because I do a lot of measuring in my other hobbies. So.
That's amazing. Great question, Janosch. I was always curious myself, just couldn't ask him. Let's see, anything in the chat here. Great to do, wonderful. So question from Euro here. Now, Euro, I'm going to see if I missed anything, if this is a follow-up question of sorts. But anyways, question from Euro. For example, in a particular small game, like 4-player card game, for multiplayer using Photon, etc., is it or does it count it as one CCD for 4 users? in one game room, or is it counted as 4 concurrent users? And then I'll continue on how a game room and concurrent users is calculated in multiplayer games if Photon or similar are used.
I would put a fair size of money on it being that would count as 4 concurrent users, 4 connections effectively. And if you're playing remotely, that would be 4 separate connections from various places in the world connecting to your single room. So that would be 4 players in that case. Yeah.
Awesome. Hopefully that helps out there, Euro. But you know what? Oh, there it is. There, Anil with a question right when I was going to wrap things up. Anil, great question. Should we be learning Unreal as well? Or would you say Unity is good enough?
I'll give you my stock answer to this question anywhere. Always, you should never stop learning anything. Never. Just never stop.
Yep.
If you feel you have the time to learn something like Unreal, do it. What's the worst that can happen? It's going to strengthen you as a programmer. It's going to strengthen your resume. It's going to make you think in different ways. It's not going to be just the fact that you learn a new engine. It's going to make you a better developer.
All right. Yeah.
So
no.
I would always say if you can make the hours in the day, learn everything you can. And Unreal is definitely one of those things.
Yeah. Great point there, Cash. So with that, Anil, I think you're very strong in Unity, if I'm not mistaken, and people who learn Unity first will pick up Unreal much easier than vice versa, right? Starting off Unreal, harder to pick up, but then you can transition to Unity. Unity easier to pick up, and then easier to transition to the other engine as well. So hopefully that helps out, but great insights there, Cash. Really do appreciate it. And yeah, we've got that workshop next week, Anil, so hope to see you there as well. But you know what? Everyone, I think those were all the questions that we had waiting. Thank you all for joining us on this workshop. Super exciting. It was a different workshop, but everyone loved it. Cash, the man, the myth, the legend. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Today.
I really appreciate you guys turning up. I hope you enjoyed it. If you get a chance to watch the recording, I'd love to see. So I want to leave you this one piece of homework. If you do want to have a stab at this, and there was something I was going to do yesterday, completely turn this thing on its head. Change the game. So instead of playing tag, you start with one zombie. If you touch somebody, they turn to a zombie, and then the last man standing. So that's your homework. Please do it.
That's it. Zombie, hey, if anyone can do it, shoot us a message, Slack, email us, LinkedIn us. Cash, I'm sure you'd love to see it. But that's your homework right there, is recreate this in a zombie type of game. So we'll send you these recordings. We'll send you the project files and assets. But Lee, Anil, Ben, Janosch, Vicente, Leo, Kiel, Ken, where was he again? Andri, everyone here currently on the workshop. Cormac, Roderick, thank you so much for joining us, sticking around till the very end. I hope you all enjoyed it. Cash, I can't thank you enough. You killed it. It was a true pleasure and an honor to have you with us today on this workshop here. So thank you again. Can't thank you enough. For all of you sticking around, thank you as well for joining us. Fabulous questions. Let us know if you can recreate this in a zombie type. But with that here, we can wrap things up. Hope to see you guys all on our future workshops, maybe in one of our courses. Reach out to us just for a friendly chat. We love talking about this stuff. You can see Cash learned about new tools himself as well, loves chatting and answering questions. So here to help with anything. Cash, any last words before we wrap up here?
Just thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. And go forth and create awesome things. And don't stop learning or else.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again, everyone. My webcam is a little fuzzy, but no worries. Have a wonderful day, a great evening, a great morning if you're abroad. Hope to see you all again soon. Thanks again for joining us. And Cash, once again, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Have a wonderful. Take care, everyone. Bye.